Senator Conway Walsh.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach, and thank you for your presentation. I was very much looking forward to this morning, and I really do want to commend you for the work that you have done over the years. I just want to ask you, maybe Diarmuid yourself, what's your own background?
I was my own background. It's fairly checkered.
Is it? No, I don't want to go into.
No, it's not.
Is it
not
finance?
economics.
Is it
no,
finance?
I mean, I finished school in 1970. 16, but I had my leaving cert, and I went to London. I did accountancy for a year and a half, but couldn't take London. The weather was like this, so I came back here, and I was in construction for over 20 years. I was engineering, surveying, and then I got into journalism, sports journalism, the cartoon section of the Irish Examiner, and I was in that for about over 20 years, and then recruited by Luke out here and advising him on economic matters outside in Brussels because of this. But like, I have no qualifications on this, and I wouldn't pretend to have. I mean, like, we know what we know, but we also know like that there's an awful lot we don't know. But like, this is not just a question of economics. There's a question here of right and wrong, and that's the bigger question to me. And like this, like what was done to us was wrong, and it's accepted. I mean, you know, even the guy from the IMF has said, you know, that like what was done to Ireland was completely wrong. Like I mentioned it there, they didn't have the support structures in place for a currency, new currency, when it was launched. They're now trying to put in all those support structures. You know, and you've all these acronyms now, like the single supervisory mechanism, the single banking mechanism, and the ESM, and all these different, you know, they were all needed from the very beginning. And if they had been there when the banking crisis hit, when it hit Ireland, like the shock would have been absorbed across the entire Eurozone. We would not have been landed with that bill.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. But I think your campaign is a real demonstration of when you have passion and purpose about something, what you can achieve and where you can bring it to, and how you can stick with it. So I do want to commend you on that. Now, I just want to ask you in terms of the ECB, where they said this could be tackled but would be very difficult. Have you that in writing? Did you say you had a report?
No. We sat down with these. Actually, did a report on it afterwards, and I'm not the most diplomatic of people. So we'd been meant to meet a chap called Mr. Rodriguez, who was the head of the ECB delegation here, and I think his father died that week. So when we actually went up to meet this guy, these two guys, like, I expressed my disappointment that we weren't meeting this senior person to the two people who we were actually meeting across the way, which, you know, was bad manners. But then one of the individuals, the guy who did most of the speaking, explained to us, he was actually senior to the other fellow. So, like, he was the most senior guy. But the other thing was, they didn't want their names used. I mean, please trust us. We don't lie anyway about them, but they didn't want their names used. When I explained that we were doing a report on the meeting with both the central bank and themselves, and he said, yeah, okay, by all means. He said, but please don't mention our names. That was all. So we did this in the report, but like, Fiona was there with me, and like, this was the significant thing. And we mentioned that at the time when he said it was very difficult, that then it wasn't impossible.
This was within the ECB?
This was the senior, he was a senior official of the ECB here, with the Troika in Dublin, when the Troika was still here. This, I think, I know it was 2012 or 2013, but the Troika was still here. So, and like, it was a long meeting, but like, you know, he didn't, like, he knew what we were there for.
Was that meeting minuted?
No.
Have you a note from that meeting?
No, that was just, the two of them were sitting on one side of a table, Fiona and myself were sitting on the other side of a huge table.
Okay. Have you any of these meetings minuted, either with the central bank?
I wrote, I mean, I had a blog at the time, it was the Chattering Magpie 14, because Ballyhea, black and white, so, and I used to play full forward, so it was the Chattering Magpie 14. So I wrote the blog in that afterwards. And like, the blog was detailed because I would have done that immediately afterwards. So I know that there weren't contemporaneous notes that I was taking, but like, I would have had a very fresh memory with Fiona on what had actually happened at the meeting.
Right, okay, so you have a note of it. I should say that we would be completely supportive of a cross-party committee as you're asking for. You talk about legal advice, that you've got legal advice. You think that there's legalities there that this can be challenged on. Have you? Where did you get the legal advice from?
It wasn't us, the Ballyhea. No, there's a case actually that has been held before the Supreme Court, and the verdict hasn't been delivered yet on that point I was talking about, where they were using historic valuations for their assets, which is, you see, there's a major difference here. Like there were accounting standards that were changed and brought in here in 2005. Like you have, what's it, the IAC 39, I think it was International Accounting, IAS 39, and that allowed bodies in the accounting standards to report, to use historic valuation. So if you had property, you could use the mortgage valuation from 2 years before, 3 years, it goes up, I think, up to 3 years back. But like, that's a standard, and there's a major difference between a standard and the law. And that's what I read out earlier on in this thing was about, that like where there's a difference between an accounting standard, a professional standard, and the law takes precedence. And what this guy was saying in Britain was that, you know, in 95% of the cases, and Michael is an accountant, he will understand this, in 95% of the cases, like the law, if you go by the standards, you will also be complying with the law. And if, for example, even you had a situation where you were valuing and your house had appreciated in value, now you were given, which it was a lower value, but it was still, you weren't misrepresenting in the point of somebody might be investing in that. But what was happening here was that they were overstating by a figure almost 2 to 1. The value of what they had in their books.
I just want to get at this. So when you say the Supreme Court, is it the
It hasn't given its verdict yet on that.
Which Supreme Court?
The Irish Supreme Court.
Oh, the Irish.
And the guy that has taken the case was Ed Heafy, who's a banker in Cork.
Okay, I know the others want to ask questions. I just want to ask you, do you think, as we are now, that we could have the same thing over again? Do you think there's any mechanisms that have been put in place that would prevent the very same thing happening again in terms of the issuing of promissory notes? We're at a situation at the moment where we have major external threats, if you like, between Italy, between the trade war, between Brexit and all of that, and we have the overinflation of property. Could we be in the same position again?
I don't think that you'll get it, because they have put a lot of the support structures in place now. They still haven't got them all in there, and they haven't got the they still haven't got the Europe-wide deposit assurance scheme. But where we are susceptible to a major shock is if interest rates go up. Like our national debt is still astronomical, and like they talk about debt to GDP, but GDP is not a good measure for Ireland.
Exactly.
It should be the GNI, debt to GNI, and like by that measure, we're still off the Richter scale.
Do you think anything has changed in the culture of the banks?
None, nothing. Like you have in the banks at the moment, we bailed them out once through actual pouring money into them. But we're bailing them out again a second time in Ireland, because you have, like the ECB, the banks get their money through the ECB, and they're getting it for 0% interest rate, and they'll lend it. They've got a license to print money. And on the basis of that, like they're charging 4 or 5% now. So we are bailing them out in Ireland. Like our interest rates are way above what they are in Europe. We're bailing them out a second time through the interest rates that we're paying.
And then they have tax-free for decades as well. So
and now they're talking about, again, the bonus culture, because they're making profits, but the profits they're making they don't need to work for them.
Thank you very much.